Everybody seems to have their own ideas as to where they want to go with flooring and that. I went over one problem. Somebody has a doorway that is hardwood and all the hardwood is messed up in the doorway, and the options that I had given you is maybe if there's a closet area that you can take the hardwood out of the closet and put either tile or just some other product, a plank flooring or something in the closet, cut it behind the door, and then utilize that material from the closet to make your repair. If you're repairing hardwoods, that's a very, very easy thing. For anyone that's versed in hardwood, they can do magic with having just enough of the original material to fix things. So if the option's always there to take it out of a closet, or maybe not, like you had said, maybe to do a tile, cut a square out and you would put a molding, say, around it onto your hardwood and leave an edge, and then insert something like a tile like this. That way it gives you a little more durable surface, and that in the doorway adds a little bit of a different touch. You can use any type of size tiles. They come in various sizes, as you see here. There's a 2 foot by 2 foot. It's the same as what's out front here. Tiles are something that are a little easier to work with than people would think sometimes. They can be a little tricky cutting. Diamond wheels, such as I've got set up there, as a wet wheel. You can rent these from about 3 or 4 different places in town. At home, I cut them with a diamond wheel and a small grinder. The diamond wheels, sometimes if you watch, I think Princess Auto has a set of 3 sometimes on, 3 of them for like $20. And they usually come with a segmented one, which is in sections, or a solid one. And they fit on a small grinder. These small grinders you can pick up for a reasonable cost as well. And it's multifunction. You can use it to sharpen your lawnmower blade if you want. But I use them for cultured rock and for cutting tile. I've only got 1 or 2 cuts. It's a little dusty, but I mean, if you're no use renting that saw for a day or a half a day, if all you'd want to do is cut around, say you've done a wall and you've only got 1 section around an outlet or a kitchen tap or something that you're trying to go around, you can mark it out, cut it with that diamond wheel. Just be careful, go a little slow, safety glasses and hearing protection, because they chatter on the stone or porcelain. If you're cutting larger tiles than that, for around bathroom fixtures such as your shower and that, you can take the wheel and cut. You draw your circle on here, say. You're trying to go, say it's at the side of the tile, and you're trying to fit it to where the shower nozzle for the adjustable is. Take and just cut like this with the diamond wheel, and then you can just take and snap off of each section around and take the diamond wheel and true it up. Or you can do it on a wet wheel like that. But I find if you can attack it like this, you can get in deeper. If you're going to go with a larger wheel, mark it on the back side so that when you're cutting, you just come up to the line. Just up to it, because the wheel leaves an area that's on the angle like this. So if you cut in lines like that, and then just take them out. There's various spacers you can use between tile. They're like this. They come in various sizes that you can set. And I usually set them like this on the exterior of the tiles. I've seen people put them like this and actually leave them in tile. Well, then when you go to put grout in, you only get a very little bit of grout. And when you wipe it with your sponges, you end up with these showing in the corners. They're not designed to be put in like that. Usually they're like this so that you can actually pluck them out.
What's the difference between the types of cut those 2 different wheels make?
These wheels, if it's a long extended cut and you're trying to go fairly quickly, this wheel will get hot and start to wobble slightly. A segmented wheel will dissipate heat and the blade doesn't distort. That's the difference between a segmented and this. Remember on the skill saw blades, I showed you one that was all laser cut? It's the same thing. It's designed so that when the heat builds up in it, it doesn't distort. Because as soon as it tries, this gets hot and it expands at a rate, it doesn't stay true. It ends up cupping one way or the other. So as it's spinning, it's doing this. That's when you'll get it where it'll chatter as it goes and it'll chip off edges and that on you, whereas the segmented wheels won't. Tiles can be also cut with a wheel. There's a tool, I don't have one with me tonight. You can place them on where it just scores it, and when you push down, it just snaps the tile. If it's just straight cuts that you're going to be doing, that's an economical way to do them. It's a diamond wheel basically that you just apply the pressure to the handle and you run it across, and it's like cutting glass. It scores a line there, and there's a piece that's actually shaped like your tile sits like this. And the table it's on that tile cutter, the wheel makes an etch right here. And then the handle, when you go to bring it down, has a fulcrum that's like that. And it applies the pressure, and this little bar that stands up in the center, the two halves of the tile they make just a snapping noise and they break off. That's the way tiles have been cut for years with people. The diamond wheel in that is a simpler way for the average homeowner, if they want, just to do it themselves without buying any specialty tools, because the angle grinder can be used for a lot of other jobs around your home. Tile work, once it's been put in place in that, you end up with a grout line. These are called grout lines that are in between all the tiles. You can get all different colors and types of grout. Sanded grout is for anything that's a little larger than this. Unsanded goes onto your narrower grout lines like this. You'll find if you're applying tile, you go to whoever you're going to be having supply it to you, and you tell them what you want for a spacing between your tiles. If the grout line is a 1/4 inch, they will give you a sanded grout. Because it's sanded, it fills the gaps and doesn't sag. It's like concrete. If you get too watery a concrete mix in that, it just like soup, it just runs out. Whereas the unsanded, that's so fine, it's just like a talcum powder almost. And when you wet it and press it in, you use a grout pad, it's soft on the edges. You take the grout and apply it in sweeping motions on the tile. And come from 2 or 3 different directions. Don't just take it always one way. Take it in sweeping motions, because your trick is to get it pushed all the way into the little cracks and grout lines that are there. Once it's set up a little bit, you want it that it's not real wet, but it's still got to have some moisture in it. You have a couple of sponges that you'll keep them wet, squeeze them out so they're clean, and then you just gently wipe off the excess. As you go over the edges and that, it picks up little bits of the grout and gets on your sponges. You'll always want to keep dipping them in water until you get to where when you wipe it, it's just a light haze on there. You don't want any of the material being, and don't press on the sponge. Just do it just gently, like all you want is to just hold the sponge and just drag it over the top. And you'll notice when you're doing it how the moisture wets the very top surface of the grout, and allows you to just take and clean it off and leave a nice smooth line in between each tile. There's lots of different techniques to it. You can take tile like this that comes as a mat and apply it. The only spacing you need then is to determine this one's a little large, doesn't fit. You can buy a package of these for very, very little money. So you would go to the next size down and you would take your next mat of these and set a couple of the spacers like this across the top, and then put the next row so that all your grout lines are the same width. So if they tell you this is an 1/8 or 3/16, you'll go and buy a package of these that are say 1/8 or 3/16 or what have you on the package. Some of them are in metric measurements. The old ones used to be in imperial measurements. But either way, you'll find if you look on these ones, they'll don't say on the back, but on the packaging usually that they come in, will tell you what the spacing is of the grout lines. These tiles can be put on their floors. Make sure that it's a tile designed for floor use. If it's a tile for a bathroom wall, make certain that it's for showers. A tile isn't always just a tile. They manufacture them with different coatings on them, and some of them, the finishes are either matte or a gloss finish. You don't technically usually want a matte finish in a shower per se. You'll want something with a glossier finish. Matte finishes are easy to clean as well, but they don't seal as nicely as a glossier finish. These are kind of like a subway tile. You'll see a lot of this style of tile in government buildings, hospital environments. They're not as common for housing years ago, and then all of a sudden they made a big comeback. You see a lot of designer people doing stuff in different. Rather than placing a tile like this, they'll go down and put them in a pattern like this. That was used years ago in a lot of forms of construction. It was used as a binding agent in some, an insulating agent in others. Not of all of it, like vermiculite was used in the attics. You can test a house in 30 spots and never have a hit for asbestos, but you can move over 4 inches from where the last test was done and find it. It was a product that was in the veins that they mined, and it migrated through like water. You may not hit it for days. You may never hit it in your lifetime, but the fibers from it are intrinsic to your body and cause problems, cancerous, and there's many types of illnesses that have been attributed to it. A lot of it from people who worked in the pipe fitting industry and such. Old homes, they used to use some of it in plasters. It looked like hair and fibers in it. So if you broke it up and saw a bunch of fibrous in it, it could be asbestos products. But don't naturally assume it, because back in those days they used horsehair in plaster. And horsehair was used as a reinforcing agent with it. If you wet it, it's reasonably safe to work with. Glove and bag is what they do it as.
My kitchen floor has old tiles, and when someone looked at it, they said they were the 9x9, I think.
Yes, and they would be contained.
That's what they thought might hold asbestos in it, right?
Yes.
9x9, is that right?
A lot of the original old 9x9s did have asbestos in them, and it should be treated as hazmat. It can be removed as a glove and bag, which is you wear a mask, gloves, use a binding agent, type of a glue and water. You mist it on it, and you can peel it up with a utility knife and that.
Or else just encase over it, right?
Or go over it, depending on the layers of it. It's better to be left alone if it's you're able to.
I think that's what they've done for many years. 'Cause there's layers.
Well, if there's too many layers, then that comes into another issue.
Like a linoleum over top of it?
Yeah, some of the vinyl products were used years ago also. Sheet flooring had it.
Oh, okay.
We deal with it daily in old PMQs at Shiloh. So, going back to your water stains on ceilings and such, you always want to use a product like Kills or Bullseye. I use lacquer products, just a spray of aerosol. How many people have done like podging and such for crafts, and you can spray it with a clear lacquer. You want to encapsulate anything like a water stain because it will keep coming back through. So if you put a product like Kills or Bullseye or lacquer on it, lacquer's a little harsh in the home environment. If you want to open a window and a fan and you're only got a small spot, it works well because it dries really quick. Kills or that takes a period of time to dry because a lot of those products, or some of them are oil-based, a lot of them now have migrated over to a latex base or acrylics, and they are a little more friendlier, but they still have got to be dry before you go and top coat them again. Make certain you've covered the full area, go outside of it. That way then you're certain that once you apply your next layer of paints that it doesn't come through. Ceiling tiles, anything like that people are trying to deal with?
I have that, like, popcorn ceiling, whatever.
Yes.
But it's fallen, it's on paper.
Yeah, that's usually the first layer of the old plaster paper will lift off.
Okay, and then it's like plywood underneath it.
Yeah, they were put on that way sometimes. I've seen that done late 50s, early 60s style. Some of those were done that way. There's different schools of framing were used back then. Plywood backing on ceilings was quite prevalent in some areas. Some of the areas of town here, I've seen a few. We run into it on some of the modular style homes that were built back in the older days. Simpson Sears, McLeod's, and a couple of others used to sell prefab homes, and they came with paneling on the back sides of some of their panels.
So will it have asbestos in it?
Should not.
Okay.
The stipple might, but the papered side is, if you take and wet it before you take it down, it should come off quite easily. Wear a respirator mask and gloves and proper eye protection. Chances of it being are slim, but it's one of those things. We have homes out that I'm dealing with every day. Every attic on the base has a sticker that says, considered asbestos. It's just easier to treat it as a blanket. That way you never put yourself in danger of encountering something that's going to harm you. The drywall here, I'll grab some mud and mix it up, and if you want, some of you can actually attack it.
I have a super quick question about the stains and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you have like marker, like permanent marker or whatever,
Yeah.
and using the lacquer and all that stuff, would that cover that as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
because otherwise you'll find no matter how many times you paint over it, it'll bleed through.
So if you covered it with mud, for example, and then painted it, would that cover it?
It might, but there is a chance that it could bleach through.
Okay.
And that's where a product like Kills or General Paint used to make a product that was like a plastic primer, it was called, that you could paint it on glass and then put any kind of acrylic or latex paint over glass, even it will stick. So a product to try and cover it is probably needed in an application like that. Sometimes you can remove it. There's products out there, believe it or not, they make a product called Goof Off. It's a little yellow tin. I carry it all the time when I'm around doing maintenance contracts. It'll take droplets of paint off of floors and stuff that have been there forever. But I caution you to be careful with it, to rub it on a small area that you don't see, to see how it's going to react, because with some plastics, paints and flooring, it will lift products. On walls, it'll take paint off. It's designed to do that. I find if it's like a ballpoint pen or something like that, WD-40, believe it or not, works great on a rag. It'll clean a lot of black stains off of walls and things. I don't put it on my elbows, but it's great for doing stuff like that.
And it won't take the paint off?
It won't take the paint off. WD is an oil-based product. You probably can't see it, but someone drew a hangman on the whiteboard with an indelible marker when I came the other day. I took it off with WD-40. You couldn't take it off of the whiteboard, you know. So it sometimes takes a little bit of rubbing with a cotton cloth or something, but it will take a lot of stuff off and not harm the backside. Then just take a soapy rag or something and wipe the oily residue off, because it is a silicone base. If you try and top coat paints over top after, it will bubble off and it won't stick. I'll grab a little bit of mud and some tape. I'll show a few of these here. If you want to grab a drink or something while I mix up a little bit of it. No, the only thing I did forget was we should, the fire exits and a muster point maybe across the street. I forgot about that. Yeah.
I'm dangerous, a little information I get off.
The mud boxes you can get, I'll show them as well before. The premix, I don't add a whole lot to it. It's already got to go. We used to buy it in bags as a dry powder and mix it. You always want it about the consistency of peanut butter. Yeah, it's not, yeah. Yeah, and you shouldn't have to have water to it. You should be able to go. If you find it's harder to work, you can add a little bit. It's sometimes if I'm taping, I will add a little bit of water because I'll explain it. With the paper tapes, you want moisture to permeate through the tapes. So that way then you know that the gluing agents in the mud will grab the tape and hang on.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Oh, Joe. Is he, he's pretty good at doing work and stuff. Well, I'm thinking I should grab him and help him do some stuff. But I hate
Coat over. Yeah.
crazy.
And just make sure you flare it out wider. Because the wider you flare it out, and then you spread it out over the white. And I'll use this, and I'll make one pass, second pass, and third pass, so that it's stepped out to 2.5 to 3 foot wide if you've got a real bad ugly you're trying to find a way to hide. Yeah, so you coat the whole thing. That way then it doesn't show. How did you end up deciding on this? Oh, really? Yeah. No, I talked to Leanne, there's a few people have asked about it, and that are just on the outside of it. So, when you're using premixed mud, I find a lot of the time they have enough moisture in the product. So you'll find if you take it out of the pail, it seems awful lumpy or hard or something, you can add a little bit. But what I always tell people is work it a bit first. That takes any of the air bubbles. You'll find a lot of it if you take it out. I don't know if you've done a lot of drywall mudding and that, when you put it on the wall, it looks like it's got little air bubbles all in it. That's usually in the product itself. I find it's just like whipping a cake. You zip it around in a tray. I use these. I've got a plastic one over here. They're relatively inexpensive. It's an easy way for you to carry your mud around. If you're going to sit down for a coffee or go away for an hour of that, pour a little water on top of it, and it can sit there for days. Dump it off and your mud's good to go again. It'll be a little bit runnier. You can top it up with a little extra. If you don't have to put it away in the container every time you do it. I'll put a piece of corner bead on after, but when you're doing corner beads, they would go on the outside corners. And you'll find a lot of people will put the corner of the wall, and then there's a corner bead that goes on here. The angle of these should be more like this. That way, so when you go put it on, it touches here, so that when you go to apply your mud, it goes here, and you flare it out about this far. That way then you don't, how many times have you seen where you look at a corner of a wall and you can see a line goes up here? It's where the metal portion of this actually is visual, because somebody has put this on and it's like this. It's actually higher than where you're trying to go back. So you'll always end up with the outside corner being actually in too far, and it sticks out like this. And marker didn't. And then you're always going to have a line there because it's a metal backing. And then you'll find that when you sand it, you'll hit the papered portion of it and it'll become exposed. When you paint it, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So I always say to people, it shouldn't be a perfectly square corner. It should be overbent a little bit so that when you put it on, you get an even coat of mud from here to bridge it. Tape on corners are usually the norm of the industry now. Years ago, the corners that were put on are nailed on. You can actually still buy them, or crimped on. They're a little more durable. I find high traffic areas like the basement stairs at the bottom, or where you're going around a corner from your kitchen to your dining areas and stuff. I used to always put the metal corners beads on because they are a little more rigid. The tape-on ones in plastic now, they make flex beads. I've got some here I can show you. We'll use it up on the off angle there. The tape I'll show you on the mesh tape what it looks like if it's not coated. I'm sure everyone's seen a wall where somebody's put a mesh tape on it. It looks like a little checkerboard all the way down the wall. You can fix that. You can put another layer down, flare it out a little wider. I've got some wider knives here that I'll show you. The real narrow one is great for scraping off mud or cleaning the bottom of your lawnmower. When it comes to drywall, pick something that is wider. This knife is a purpose for me. When I'm putting mud on, I use it at a different angle. The wider knives are always to wipe the mud off with. When you're putting it on, you can use something like this, as long as you have enough that your tape is going to be always wet with the mud on the back side of it. What happens is if you don't put enough mud on the first time and you put the tape on, you get a dry tape, it's called. That's when the tape always ends up, it looks like bubbles on it. When you paint it after, it'll lift off. The moisture will release. You always want enough of loose enough mud. It should be the consistency of like peanut butter. You want the moisture from this to permeate through the tape. That's what gives it its adhesion to it. If it's dry in there and it doesn't tape, the tapes will lift off. If you do encounter where it's a dry tape, take your utility knife and just cut it off and put another piece on. It's hard to fix stuff like that. You can, if you catch it when you're wiping the tape, and I'll show you one here, lift it back, take some of your mud, put it behind the tape, and then wipe it off again and make certain that it's stuck on. I can show you on one of them here. It's quite easy to recognize once you start doing it a few times. You said you're going to do a few rooms, a bathroom, I think it was, at your place.
Yeah.
So as soon as you start doing the joints and the drywall, you want to make certain they're all taped properly so that once you do the finish coats on them, it stays in place. If you don't put a tape behind a joint like that, it'll always show up. Crack will always come back. It telescopes through. Yet, the tape bridges them, and the mud just covers it. So you always want to have a piece of paper tape or even the mesh tape. It's something that bridges it and that. Some people prefer the mesh tape and the fact that it sticks on by itself. And I have seen lots of jobs where people have done perfectly fine jobs using it. I'm just a little old school, I guess. I prefer the old paper tapes. It's still what they run when a drywaller runs them. They have a machine called a bazooka they fill with mud, and it's got a roll of paper on it, and they just walk along and it puts the mud and the tape all on its own. The average homeowner won't afford to buy those tools to do their jobs. So. And it takes quite a bit of skill to learn to use those types of tools. These are basic hand tools that anybody can use once you've practiced a little bit. I always say closets are a good spot to learn. They're about the most aggravating spot you'll ever work in, but it's somewhere where nobody's going to see it once you put a shelf and hung your coat in there. You might know that there's a spot there that doesn't look quite so nice, but the rest of the stuff that you've got in the open where you've had some practice makes it a little easier. If you want, take a piece of drywall and make a few mistakes on it and just patch it up in the corner someday just to try it. It's relatively cheap to buy a half a sheet of drywall somewhere or pick up some scraps from somewhere. There's always construction sites that have got lots of scraps and you can practice a little bit on. It took me a lot of years to learn how to get it to where I am. It's always a chance to learn. We'll slip over there now and we'll put some on. Like I said, different knives have different purposes in that. There's a cheap little piece. If you're doing in the very corner, otherwise you're relegated to one side with a knife. And when you go to put this side in, it pushes the mud back around the corner on you. You know, $5 piece like that, you just put it down the corner and away you go. So, like I say, there's, and you'll see a variation of widths. And I do have some of the small ones that you can gob it on there if you want. Ones like this tray, that's an old one that I had. It originally had a metal strip in it that you can wipe off the knife. I find these stainless steel ones, they're still relatively inexpensive. Ideally, you try and keep your knife wiped clean You don't want it all running down your hands and such. It's a lot simpler to keep clean. I find here,
And how long can the mud sit before you have to worry about it drying?
you usually, when you're applying your tapes, you don't want it to sit very long at all. What happens is it'll skin over on the top surface of it, and you don't want that. If you put that on there, put your knife there,
And that tape there isn't sticky at all. The paper one isn't?
paper one's not sticky at all. All you're counting on is,
Is your mud.
Can you pre-wet your tape?
you can, with the mud. You don't want to put water on the tapes. You'll notice that I put it on rather quickly, and I should have showed you. These tapes are designed with a crease in them so that you can do around on the corners and stuff, or in the inside corners. These papers, I don't know if you can actually see, if you look through them, there's perforations in the paper. If you look up towards the light through it,
Oh, yeah.
those perforations allow the mud to come through, and when you wipe it like that, that's your first coat. And I always find if you put pressure on the back side of the knife and bend it like this, or like this, and just wipe like that,
So fair amount of pressure.
yeah, but you'll notice that it's a relatively smooth finish already. You don't want to leave ridges or lumps along the edge, because once they dry, you've got to usually take a knife or something, scrape them off, or clean them off. Because if you go to coat over top of them, they'll have a tendency to break off and get in the product that you're working with. And how many times have you tried to wipe down a wall and you find it digs into the mud and leaves a big long line down it? That's from a little bit of rubble or debris that have come off the sides of things. Ideally, that's a tapered joint like that. You'll flare out to about here, and that's when you'll use a wider knife. I'll just cheat a little. Usually you leave it till it's all dry. And ideally that, once it's dried, you can give it one more coat and go out to say here and here once that's dried. It'll take very little sanding. Like if you take a close look at that from the angle, there's very little to be removed off of that. So if you take your hand sander after and just go, don't sand in one spot. You always want to try and sand by moving in areas that.
And how many coats would you put on that? 2?
That'll put 3. A butt joint, which is what this is, where it's non-tapered, I'll go 4. I'll take it out wider. When you're patching up stuff like this, fill all the big stuff. Something goes, snaps on an angle and that, so you're starting over again. I found I used a glass cutter and then snapped them separately and then cut the rest of the tiles. So it's a lot of extra work sometimes for the real fancy. Wet water wheel works better on some of those products too, because you'll find anytime you're cutting glass, it gets hot, and that's what causes them to chatter and chafe. If you're laying out for tile or flooring and that, it's always nice to know how you're going to finish the room. So you got to kind of think, where am I going to start? try and pick the longest straight wall you're going to have, and then start from that side of the room and come across. So if you're doing a living room and into a hallway, you don't want to start into the hallway and go into the living room, because if you start a little cockeyed or something in the hallway, or say your hallway isn't 100% true to the living room, the smaller area is easier to get out of sorts. So what I always do is start on the longest wall and then come across. And if you're going into a hallway, closets or what have you, if it is a little off, the lines aren't near as noticeable as if you're out in a large area.
And if you're connecting two different types of flooring, like in a living room, you're putting in the...
If you're coming up to them, there's transition strips. And I brought a handful of them around just to show you different variations on them. This is about the most common one you see in homes. And it'll go on one, like say it's on a tile, and you're going to a laminate flooring where there's two different height differences. This is what you would use, because this would go onto the higher one, and then the slope down onto the other. If you're going on the stairs, there's a nosing type that goes on stairs. These can all be cut with your metal hacksaw.
What do you call that?
Transition strips. These are a flat transition. So if the two surfaces are the same height, you'd only leave a gap of about this much for the screws to go through, or you would run a drill bit, small one down. The screws that come with these are a Bearcat sometimes to put in. This is a surface, say you've got the vinyl is coming back and you need a bit of expansion room, you can go to a little bit larger. This goes down onto another strip. When the two heights are different, this would allow you almost a 1/4 inch difference.
Used to be able to buy it, like they could get it cut at Home Hardware, but I don't know if they do that anymore now?
Usually they go in one length. These come in lengths of 3, 4, 6, and I think 8 or 10 foot. It's hard to buy any of these products by the foot from anywhere other than a carpet or vinyl store, because they will buy it in great big tubes of the long lengths and then just cut off the lengths you need. Carpets and that are another one. They have their own specialty pieces for carpeting. If you're going up against a vinyl floor with carpeting, they make a pinch down one that the carpet actually goes into, and you take a rubber mallet and you go down and it bends the aluminum and it locks in. There's little teeth that the carpet hook on. And if you can believe it, the wood strip that goes around your room that the carpet goes in, that the carpet grips on, it's called tackless, and it's full of tacks. So I don't know who came up with that name, but those are products for each specific. So some of the vinyl products to carpets would have a different transition. They'll make a transition that has a little slot in it, and you can put a rubber piece that goes either direction, and it's like a T. It goes in and you hit it with a rubber mallet and it pinches down, and it allows the products on either side to do this so that they move. It doesn't have fasteners exposed. It's usually an aluminum strip with a little barb on each side. You can get them with a variation where they're coming from a solid piece that you're butting up to and a slope piece. This little tip here locks into this, so you've got your vinyl product here and your tile product here. This will lock into that, and you just take a rubber mallet. These come in various lengths. You can get them at the carpet stores. I think Home Depot, a lot of lumber yards will sell these products. There again, there's no exposed screws. This all splines together.
You know, when you do have some of vinyl on your stairs, you've got that awful, brother-in-law doesn't even, where you step on it, it hurts your feet when you go down the stairs. Because it's bumped up this high and then your stair is lower. You know what I mean?
Like with the nosing on it, like this.
Yeah, the nosing is also the vinyl strip. Yeah, it's also a vinyl strip, the nosing that goes on your stair. It's horrible. Can you do something else besides that?
They're like a cleat guard, are they? Like a rubber guard that goes on them?
No, they're actual vinyl, they feel like, they're not rubber.
Okay, because they do make them, they're like a vinyl or rubber, and they glue them on the tread. They're actually a non-slip is what they're designed for.
They're horrid.
They're,
Horrid.
I've seen different types of them. You can get them in a smoother finish, but they are pricey.
Because there's like some, like the stair is here, and then they got this thing, this lip here. So you step on that, and then your lip, like it's horrid.
I'd have to see it to know more of what you're talking about on that.
I don't know, I'd rip it out.
Because we put a lot of the vinyl tread guards on for rentals and that, so that they're easier to clean. And they come in a lot of different colors, but you'll find a lot of them range between $40 and $70 a stair. So they are quite expensive, some of them now. I used to get a black rubber one that went on stairs, or vinyl as well, and they've got a bunch of little ridges on them. You see them in a lot of commercial applications as well on stairs. They're a non-slip.
That's the whole stair.
Yeah,
This is only like this wide on the lip.
just on the nose.
Yeah, it's horrid.
I'd have to, there again, like I said, I'd have to see the product to know what it was.
Dennis, I have on my stairs, going downstairs, it's just a really inexpensive thin carpet that's covering it.
Yeah,
And on many of the stairs, they're just wood stairs, but it feels really like there's a big bump, like an inordinately large bump.
so it's carpet over the stairs, like?
And that was the way it was.
You'll find what's happened is they probably had rubber backing underneath the carpet, but a lot of the time they'll put, so that it makes it softer, is an underlay pad. They'll cut them to fit the stairs, and over time some of them will deteriorate and they'll actually pound out. You can have the stairs recovered in that, and they'll put new underpad in there.
Is that something that's the type of thing that you could tackle on your own?
I wouldn't recommend it for a homeowner, because the fact that stairs are something that you need a kicker if you're going to put the smooth edge along the backside and wrap with the carpet all the way up. It's a lot of intricate cutting that,
Oh, the kicker's already there.
no, but like for the carpet to go
Oh, I see.
on to cut the carpet, that you don't end up with big gaps on the ends and that. Usually it takes a fairly trained person to cut and fit stairs. They're not something that I recommend a homeowner take a whirl at.
Okay.
Just simply because I've seen a few disasters in my day. We were kicking around the vinyl. A lot of the products that you'll see in homes nowadays, you can get specialty coverings for this and specialty coverings for that. Vinyls and tiles and such are something that are tough to do anything with other than what the manufacturers say you can. So don't try painting over a tile or such, because those are things that they'll peel off. It'll end up looking not too good in the end. You'll find a lot of these products Manufacturers have designed them for where they go. And that's why I say if you're going to do a backsplash in that, look for something that the manufacturer states is for that. If you're going to be doing something like tileway and say an entryway, look for something that'll work in those areas. That's tile that's designed for a traffic area. If it's a vinyl that you want to place down, reference any of the supply companies that are around. There's Jenkins and Remnant Barnes, there's Stewart's. Stewart's is a good spot for some of the smaller bits and pieces. They have like the end of the roll ends and odds and ends that they've picked up from jobs. You can usually find enough to do a bathroom, say, or say a small kitchen in an area, or if you're wanting to do a repair and you just want to patch in for a closet or somewhere.
That's where I got mine.
They're good people to deal with, and they can give you a lot of information. They've been in the business long enough to know what'll stand up. If you're looking for something just to toss down and then sell, or if it's a rental where you're going to have a high traffic area, people aren't going to be watching what they wear across the floors, and you're looking for something that's fairly durable.
I ended up finding a remnant piece there that it was vinyl, and but it had a felt backing,
Yes.
and they said didn't require glue. You just put it down in the baseboards, and your vanity hold it down.
Yeah, it's a float. It just floats.
Yeah, and they said it's really great. Like it doesn't. You don't have to actually like self-level it, or like if there's.
No, there's enough of those products that will cover an area that has a little bit of imperfections.
Yeah.
Those are good products, and there again, they knew what the application of the product is. And there again, I don't know all of the new latest greatest are out there. These are people that are in the industry and sell this product every day. They see the newest products, and there again, some of the old battleship type floorings that you got were rather rigid. If you had something on a floor, it showed through it terribly. So a product like this that has a felt type of a backing product will absorb some of that, and it softens. If there is anything there, it softens the look of it. It won't show near as bad. Any of those floors that float, which means that they're not actually fastened down, they probably would be able to tell you how much to leave around the edges for it to move and that. Some floorings have different expansion rates. Tile, for instance, you can run them right tight almost to the wall. They're not going to expand and contract a lot. Wood products, they expand and contract a fair bit. We did a large area in an engineered flooring product. It was run within a 1/4 inch of the wall, and there was a 3/4 inch baseboard and then a 3/4 round on it. It was an old style home with a big tall wood baseboard like this with a little rounded edge on the front. The room was 100 and some feet long. The engineered flooring actually shrank enough that it pulled out from under the baseboards to where you could see 3/4 of an inch on the ends of it. So that meant that that flooring had to have moved 2.5 inches. So they say they're engineered products, but they will expand and contract a fair bit. So know, if it's a smaller room, know that you can put them under the baseboards 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Leave a small space at the wall for, you got to watch for temperatures when you're installing it. If the home is cool, it's going to expand a lot when you bring it up to temperature. Some of these products, like your subfloor materials that go in, need to be what's called climatized in the home. They need to be in the home at least 24 hours before you apply it. You don't just buy it off the shelf, take it home and put it down. By climatizing, what it means is it normalizes into the temperature and humidity of the building.
Does that mean your package has to be open?
No, as long as they're brought into the home. Like subfloor materials and that, these flooring materials just have to be brought to the same temperature in the room. But if the subfloor materials like the plywood products or engineered products that go under the flooring, try and keep them in the home 24 hours before you go to apply them. That way, if it's put down when it's cold, when you first drag it in the door, and then all of a sudden you get gaps between them. They always fill those gaps, but you shouldn't have major ones. They use what's called a water putty, and it just levels all the joints and fills in any nail imperfections along the joints on them. If there's a large area where the two pieces of subfloor material don't meet properly, they'll put a water patch on there and then they just sand it and it comes smooth. Always look for the best information you can get from whoever's supplying it to you. If they have a piece of, these materials come with a box, there's an instructional sheet in every box. Tells you what you've got to watch for. A lot of the time too, it'll have warranty information. Read that warranty information. There's nothing more disappointing than have someone put a flooring material down and they didn't follow the manufacturer's warranty. And if you do have a problem with it, the first thing these companies will do is come in and say, well, it wasn't installed properly, so we can't warranty it. So then you're out of pocket the cost of the original install, and you either live with it or you pay to have it done again. Things like hardwoods, small patches, the average homeowner can do, but if you're going to try and refinish a hardwood floor, that's a bit of a specialty item. There's people that do that around here. You can sand finishes off. I've had a lot of people take carpets up in an old home and they'll have had tackless around the outside, or the smooth edges it's called, and they'll want the nail holes filled in that. What someone who does a lot of hardwood floors will do is they sand the floor and they keep the product that they've sanded the floor and they'll mix glue in it and then patch it with it. That way it's the same wood product going into the floor as the patches. That way it takes stains the same as the rest of the floor. Those are things the average homeowner wouldn't know to do, and the equipment that they use is a lot larger than you or I would ever attack with a belt sander, or you definitely don't want to be trying to attack any of it with a hand sander. They've got the equipment that come in and sand the floors down and do a proper job. There's specialty sanders that go right against the wall, and then either drum or pad sanders that you can take and do large areas. There's techniques for doing it. You don't ever want to stop the machine, because you can rent the machine to do it. Believe you me, I did once. It was a learning curve. The very first time I stopped a drum sander and it started to cut into a floor, I learned very quickly that you had to be careful in how you do it. I was lucky enough to, as I said, I had a closet that I could remove some hardwood and fix my mistake with. But if you're not inclined to doing that yourself, it can cost you a lot of money to replace flooring and that. So in a small area like your doorway, that's an area that you could attack. A little bit of direction, mark out properly, take out the section of wood. There again, you could put something like these around those areas and then put the infilled area with vinyl or something else. Makes cleaning a lot simpler if it was vinyl or a tile product. I touched on perimeter glued vinyls. They work well in bathroom areas to keep from where the moisture is from getting underneath them. Some of the newer products in that are especially designed for high moisture areas, and they have products that aren't so susceptible to the moistures in those areas. A lot of the old ones had a paper type backing. If the moisture got into it, it turned black. It would show where the water leakage had been in it. It wouldn't show up right away, but it would take a few months or whatever, and then the vinyl starts to turn black. There again, that's not being sealed properly and moisture getting in those areas. We had touched on sealing the joints on it. Those are the kits. What I didn't touch on is this is what's called a high gloss one. If you look at your floorings, there's matte finishes, semi-gloss, and gloss. So you don't, if you've got a floor that doesn't have a real high sheen, you wouldn't use this to seam seal it. You'd use a product with a flatter finish to it. What other types of flooring have you interests in? Carpets?
Is carpets easy to put down, or would you hire someone? Because like you see these people,
The
it seems like it'd be hard work for them.
kicked in carpets are a tough one because they're stretched. You can use power stretchers, but you still need to use what's called a kicker. A kicker is a tool, if you don't know, has little teeth in it and a rubber pad on it. And what you do is it locks into the carpet and you actually knee it. You kick it forward with your knee. So you go along the perimeter of the room. You would put down tackless, which is the strips with all the little nails in it. And then you would kick the carpet to it and stretch it all the way around. Or you can use a power stretcher, which has a bunch of poles that stick together, a piece that goes here, and then a lever that actually pulls the carpet different directions. But you still have to kick it onto the tackless strips around the outside edge that hold it. That's a job best left to somebody who's an installer. First off, you're not going to find a kicker. They buy them from supply companies that supply them with all of their products. If the room is small enough that it doesn't require seaming, and you want to use, say, a rubber back carpet, that's perfectly doable for the average homeowner because the rubber back is just fitted to the room and the baseboard holds it down along the outside and it doesn't move. If you're going to do something with a loop pattern, make certain the knives you attack them with are very sharp. There's nothing worse than hooking a thread on a carpet with a knife or something and then you pull it and it comes and runs in on the carpet. Berbers are known for that. If you don't have a sharp knife and cut clean through, don't grab the piece that's on beside you and pull. Make certain that it's cut clean off and that it just separates for you. You used to get what's called jute back carpets that have an underpad that goes and it looks like burlap on the back side of them. Again, they go up against a tackless strip around the outside, but they can be seamed. The problem is the average homeowner can't seam them. You need a hot iron that goes between the carpets, and there's a strip that has a binder, and it's a hot glue. You heat it with an iron, and as you go across, the carpet folds open, and the iron has a little shoe that goes through, and it rolls the carpet up, and as it's hot, you go through and it folds it back down. And there, again, you need a couple of specialty tools. There's a wheel that has a bunch of little hooks that you roll above it, and it pulls the pile all up along where you've done your seaming. And that's why I say those are carpets that are best bet left to a carpet installer.
Yeah. Well, I have a porch that has an outdoor carpet, like indoor-outdoor carpet.
Yep.
And so when I repainted the porch and everything, I have linoleum on one side where you would sit.
Yep.
And the area that you walk through all the time, they put the carpet. So kind of go backwards. So I've often thought of replacing that.
No,
Just buy the strip of it. And
that would be one that you could easily do. And there again, it's likely glued down,
I don't know. If
or
I
did they
put
put
the-
strips down each side of it?
I put the, like, it looks like they've just got the old baseboards holding it. Like it seems to be fairly loose.
Yeah, so that would be a fairly easy one then for you to attack. And there again, you can buy different things. What I've seen people do in areas like that or hallways are those runner strips. And you can just buy them at the carpet stores in a pattern, the length, whatever you like. They come in a big roll. I think even Walmart used to sell runner strips that you can buy.
water would, like when you maybe lose control.
I guess so, but it's really hard to keep it clean because it really kind of cuts through them. I have no runner mats.
So you can get the vinyl runners that to length as well.
Yeah,
And they're sold through quite a few of the carpet stores, or I think Canadian Tire has a vinyl type one.
the ones that have the little teeth in it, they just kind of,
Yes. And they're quite easy to keep clean as well.
But what's under,
oh, what's under it? I don't know, I have never lifted it up, so I'll muck it up. But you can see where it's probably just like subcoat, like a, there might
Yeah,
be
if it-
old wood, right? Because like the top roof is the wood planks,
Probably tongue and groove.
so I imagine the floor is
Probably the same.
Okay. But then if I lift that up, then I'd have to finish it.
So how do you remove carpet? Like you start on one side and just.
You pull it off. If it's been glued down a lot of the time, and it's a lot of work, you end up scraping the glue off of the floor. Home Depot has a neat machine. It's got a wheel for removing it. They've an abrasive one that's got teeth on it for cleaning glue off of concrete, and they've also got like a sanding disc that you can go across the floor to take it off. There again, if you're going to rent things like that, I think C&C has them. Home Depot, Hertz Rental, I believe, has one. Tell them the area you're going to do. If it's on concrete, they'll give you a certain wheel, or if it's a subfloor in a home, they'll give you a different wheel to do in those areas. And I don't believe they're that expensive to rent for like an afternoon to clean it up. Any kind of carpet that had a rubber back is usually quite nasty to clean up. Wear a dust mask and eye protection and that for it, because the dust from it can bother a lot of people because it's a rubber product and it's broken down. There's a lot of grungies in carpets. You know, dusts and allergens collect in carpets. Anyone with asthma would understand that carpets and pets sometimes can cause a lot of grief for anyone with allergies.
So you mentioned those 3 places to rent tools from. Are there any other ones in Brandon to look at? Or just like power tools in general? I know you've mentioned them a little bit throughout the course. But what would you recommend looking at?
There's a couple of different rental companies that are in Brandon now. And I haven't been around to some of the newer ones around, like United Rentals is up on Richmond Avenue. There's Hertz, there's Expert Rentals. C&C has always had a fair bit of homeowners tools, and they cover quite a big area of tools. Home Depot, of course, has their tool rental section. Sometimes if you're curious, just wander through and have a look. They've got all kinds of stuff. If you want to rent brad nailers for putting your baseboards back on around after you've done, they can help you there. They have gas ones as well as air ones there. The cordless ones are a great deal for just doing a small project because you don't have to drag a compressor around and what have you. It's just a butane cartridge in the gun and a battery that fires the nails. So there again, they're not that expensive to rent for, you know, an afternoon if you're on a weekend if you're doing a small project. Beats putting out $200 or $300 for a tool that you might only ever use a couple of times. And then it's something that you got to drag around or sits on a shelf and you don't get the use. You're better off to spend $20 or $30 or what have you for a rental and not have to worry about it.
I have a goofy question. My house has old vinyl flooring.
Yeah.
And so where they have the seam, it's hardwood underneath, but where they have the seam, instead of putting a glue or a kit or anything, they use this plastic strip. Like it's like almost like a hard plastic.
Yeah.
Do you-
I've seen different
Can you
things like
get
that.
anywhere anymore, or is that?
I would check with someone like the carpet guys, like say Jenkins or Stewart's or someone like that. Someone might have some of it still around, or if they've got a product that will replace that item.
Because the linoleum is actually still in really good shape, and I don't wanna really rip it up and redo the hardwood.
Mhm.
Where these seams are, all the plastic stuff has started to crack, right? So if I could just get something that could just,
And ideally, if you have an area that you can lift a piece of it off, if you know there's a piece that's loose somewhere or that,
bring us up.
and take a sample of it to them. If they can't replace something like that, they'll be able to tell you what you may be able to do to rectify a problem like that, because there's so many different products nowadays. I don't do probably enough flooring to stay up to date. I've got a buddy that lives down the road from me that any jobs that I do anymore, I get him to do them for me, because of the fact that he's got the latest tools. He has more knowledge in some of that. I can tell you how to fix some of the old stuff and that, but some of the products that were around when I was on the tools doing them maybe aren't available anymore.
What is that stuff called? Do you know what the name of that, like?
It'd be just a transition strip of some sort. And I mean, for years, this was the staple of the industry. You know, a metal strip like that. And a lot of them weren't even screw nailed down. They had those little nails that they drove through them. Everybody seems to hook their socks on eventually. And there again, that's where I say a little bit of research into what you're trying to do. It's a lot easier sometimes to cure a headache before you get in too deep. And that's why I say sometimes if you can pop a sample off and go to somebody like,
I tried to explain it to somebody, but they looked at me as if I was crazy because I literally didn't know what it was called. Transitions.
well, and sometimes too, you'll get, maybe it's a product that was used 20 years ago or 30 years ago or longer, and you've got a guy at the counter that's 22 years old, you know?
It's quite 22.
But I mean, he might be 30 years old, but he's never actually installed the product, so he may not actually know what you're talking about for that particular reason. And that's why I've always been either a picture or a sample of something. Is sometimes things can get lost in communication verbally. It's pretty tough to go, I need something that looks like that. I have no idea what it's called, but that's what I need,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
you know?
But they might be able to figure out something else.
Well, and that's what I say. If they know what the original product was there, they can determine what it was doing. So then if there is something new that you can put in its place, they would be able to tell you. Anything else for flooring that interests you? Tonight's another short night, people. 8:30. Now you just have your own little kits to get started with.
What is your glue called that you called for linoleum?
There again, it depends on the product that you're putting down.
Mastic.
Well, no, mastics are used on tiles product, but there are mastics used under some of the floorings. And if you're buying a piece of vinyl at a remnant store or someone like that, they will be able to tell you what products you can put for an adhesive on them.
We're talking linoleum? Like vinyl?
Vinyl flooring, a lot of them, there's different glues for.
Okay, but this is a vinyl one too. That's what I'm asking. Are we talking about linoleum or vinyl?
Linoleum.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So confused.
See, there again, there'd be two different adhesives for this or for the other.
Right, so I'm talking the other, like the thin.
Vinyl flooring.
Yeah.
A lot of them use a mastic type on them, but there again.
That you would put around the edge, like that's what you were saying? Like if I wanted to redo my linoleum that's in my bathroom.
In the bathroom, if you're going to the remnant store to buy one, ask them for a perimeter glue product, and then they will be able to supply you with the glue for it.
Okay.
Because a lot of the people that, like Armstrong Flooring makes their product, they like you to use their type of glue. But if it's not an Armstrong product, they'll be able to give you a comparable product to do that.
Okay.
That way you're getting the right materials to do the job. You know, if someone says, well, I got this glue left over from a job, and you go and stick it all down and it doesn't adhere properly, or it reacts with the vinyl, you know, things like that happen. It's like,
I was looking for mine last week at Jenkins. The price they gave me for one that I found there that I liked, it was for the vinyl and the glue. So they just automatically assumed
Put it in.
I would want, yeah.
And see, I have the vinyl at home. I just don't have the glue.
So you don't know what kind it is.
No.
Do they mark it on the back of your,
they might have a marking of some sort on the back of it.
Okay.
where'd you buy it?
That came from my house.
That's the
People
thing.
left all my flooring with my house. When they did the house, they left all the flooring, so.
Have you got a,
Replace it, and
is it a big enough piece to cut a little piece off?
Yeah.
Take that. Take that to somewhere and ask them if they have a glue to hold for adhering to those products.
Okay. My other question is, could you put,
Transition strips?
transitioning strip along the side of the bathtub
Yes.
by the floor?
And then
Rather
seal it
than
with
like a wood
silicone.
piece?
Pardon?
Like I have one similar like that, but it's like wood.
Yep. The biggest thing that I always say in bathrooms and areas, if you're going up against the tub,
Yeah.
put a bead of silicone along it
Okay.
so that it's sealed so the water can't get down into your flooring.
Okay.
Will the metal rust if it's beside a tub?
This is aluminum, so it will not rust. If
But how do you attach that to, I guess just so,
this here, you drill a hole that's a real tiny hole, and there's screws that go through this. And there's a,
that would go into the tub?
no, to the floor,
Into the floor, okay.
into your flooring. This would butt up against the tub like that.
Silicone underneath it, drill your holes, and then fill it to your floor.
Silicone on top. Like between the tub and the floor.
Yeah,
On top or underneath?
no, on top of the flooring.
On top of the flooring underneath that.
The flooring would be under this.
Yes.
So your silicone is where?
Underneath.
Pardon?
Okay, got it.
So then the silicone goes on top of that.
Just along this edge, but just a nice thin bead of it.
With your finger. Yes, yes.
Believe it or not, that's the staple of it.
It's true. It's
And then you wipe it on your pants and read it.
Well, if you look at my apron, it's got, or my pants. That's pretty common.
My strip is coming off, that's why I asked.
Yeah, no, these a lot of the time will have
It's really nice like that.
they'll be just like those. They're a royal pain, and I always try and pre-drill them. Find a drill bit that's a little smaller than those, and then just very careful, because it's a very tiny drill bit. Just pre-drill it, and then run those screws in. And if you happen to get where you're lucky enough to take a screw out, and sometimes you'll run the screw in and the hole is worn from it being moving, and the screw will not tighten up, take a little bit of white glue, dip a toothpick in it, and put it down in the hole and break it off, and put another one in beside it with a little glue. Come back the next day and run the screw in. It'll tighten up the hole.
Sorry, you leave the toothpick in.
Yeah, leave the toothpick in, because it's just, you're filling the hole back in with a wood product that the screw can bite into again, and then hold whatever you're trying to hold down.
Oh, that's so smart.
It's funny, I did that at ACC in the library,
Yeah,
or the legs were really loose.
Yeah,
And they found that one of the ones was stripped. So yeah, one of the guys was like, oh, let's go get some pieces of wood or toothpicks or something. And
yeah.
the other guy's like, what are you talking about? And
No, that's a pretty common practice with anyone that's ever had to repair furniture or things like that.
yeah, it works perfectly.
Like years ago, if they were fastening to concrete, they used to drill a hole in the concrete and drive a piece of wooden doweling in and then nail to it. That's how you used to fasten to floors.
They put a wooden dowel on it?
Yeah, and then you drive the nail into the wooden dowel. Because the nail hits it and it expands to the hole, so it can't pull the dowel out, and the nail is held by the wood.
That was before they had the bolts that expanded in cement.
Yeah, quickie bolts. Yeah. Swedge anchors, they're called, or. Yeah. There's also plastic plugs that they make that you can drive in and the screws will thread into them. I'm not a big fan of them because they don't take a lot of torque and they'll strip out.
Yeah, I know some people come in and have to replace a whole bunch of them because they keep snapping them in half. Or
Yeah. And that's why I say a lot of the time, if it's going into like a wooden surface or that, just take like a toothpick or a popsicle stick and cut strips of it off and put just a little bit of glue, dip it in it and put it in and just snap it off to the floor and run the screw back in after the next day, because the glue sets up and it'll hold everything as hard as can be. I haven't scared yous off yet. That's something else.